Can everyone see that?
Coming up?
Yep.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
Yes.
Just going through this here as usual for the first few minutes. For those who are here for the first time, welcome to the Azure Terraform community monthly calls. The team here is represented by myself and Mark Gray, who is hovering somewhere in this chat, and I can't find him, but I know he's on here. There's a lot of folks actually who are Microsoft, but there are a mixture of, those who are maybe directly working on the product group versus otherwise. Some of them might work with you on the field or anything like that. Um, let's see here. There's this little code of conduct thing. Just be nice. That's essentially the whole point. And then, as usual, I want to talk about who we are. So our team kind of manages, as a broader team, we manage everything under deployments. So Bicep, ARM templates, Terraform. Mark and I put in most of our time to Terraform, but there is a group of people that we work with pretty much on the daily who are working on the other two tools. And then we are sister teams with Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell. So the community effort here has been ongoing for a couple of years now. We've really wanted to build an active and passionate community, and we're just continuing to iterate and find what works. The main thing that we're hoping for is that all of you can continue to just help drive energy amongst all of us here to continue just wanting to see how we can unlock better features with Terraform on Azure. There is a opportunity to present at these calls if you ever submit a talk. Today we don't have any guests because we obviously have some stuff that we announced very recently. So yeah, just always feel free to register for that. We always appreciate people signing up to give talks. And then in case you didn't have any of these, there's a bunch of stuff that we do. So there's obviously the community email distribution list. We were working out some of the kinks there. We sent out a slightly more a better flow to that email. So now there's like a Slack and a YouTube and an unsubscribe and all of that. There's a joining the Slack. Definitely make sure to check out the YouTube and the Twitter. Those blog posts, we need to get one out, but we're planning to get one out next month with hopefully everything all announced at once. So that is the usual stuff. And then I think from a high level, the question I had was, does everybody know what we just announced at HashiConf, or should we go over that?
I would vote to
Oh,
go over
good
it.
idea.
I wasn't able to see what you guys did.
Got it. Okay. Trying to keep up with the chat as it happens. So yes, I'll go over it. Let's see here. Opening. Mark, do you have some of those demos for us to possibly show? We'll do a bit of a recap version because the recording's about to come out in like the next few days. But
let me see. I can pull up the deck and share that, and we can that we have the demos in there. So
yeah. I'm pulling up the deck. I can present it. Do you want to talk on the same slides, Mark, or should we just breeze through this?
I don't think we need to go through the whole slide deck. We can kind of give a highlight. Why don't you just go to the agenda and we can talk to the things that we were talking about, and then we can kind of have a discussion on each of them. Instead of doing this in a presenter fashion, we can kind of give a highlight, and then we can have answer any questions and whatnot.
Yep.
If that sounds good to folks.
Yeah, we're not stuffy here.
Yeah,
Let's
great
do
idea.
it. All right. I will go ahead and talk about Terraform export. So we use this example here of an infra dev who was kind of looking to migrate infrastructure onto Terraform because, nothing ever gets created out of Terraform, right? But what ends up happening is that you don't really, for one reason or another, you want to represent this same exact code or configuration or infrastructure in Terraform, but it's already existing. You already kind of like how it does. Maybe you click ops your way to uh, deploying that thing, but it's kind of fuzzy a lot of times because properties aren't necessarily one-to-one mappings. It's not necessarily straightforward. That is where the Azure Export for Terraform tool kind of came in, and we actually announced that on the community a while ago. But what we exactly heard from all of you as we kind of went back to all of you and talked to you about this was pretty much every single one of you is asking for it in the portal. So there was a ton of requests about it. Um, what we ended up doing was we sort of built out the um, support for that in private preview, and then public preview we're hoping is coming out very, very soon. Um, so let me show you what that looks like. I think, oh no, we have a hidden slide here. So here was just our example where we went into a resource group and we just now this is actually an RC. So rc.portal is currently supporting this. You will need to register for this functionality if you want to try it out yourself. We have a set of instructions that we sent out with the October update. If you don't have that email for whatever reason, just send me an email and let me know. But yeah, this whole thing got exported in the matter of, I mean, this was real-time recording. I was surprised at how quick this thing is going. So it really does get everything set up. It supports Azure and AZ API here. So there is we made the decision, if you will, to kind of go and expose as many properties as we could. So all of your configurable Terraform properties are included in the Azure RM version, just to make sure that you don't miss anything while you're modifying your configuration. And these are not going to be necessarily what you'll want to deploy in a prod right off of the bat. In fact, don't do that. But with some refactoring and some modularization, you can actually get a very compelling overall experience there. So
You want to talk to where you can do that, Stephen? Where this export Terraform stuff shows up?
yeah, so it's in rc.portal. If I kind of just go
Is
ahead
it
and
on?
click into a
So it's on resource groups and resources and anything else?
no, resource groups and resources are the two right now for export. And we actually found a bug with resources. So I would say, at least for today, use resource group. But tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be able to fix the resources issue. So start out with the resource groups. Dominic, I see your hands raised here.
Is there the option to export role assignments as well for things directly assigned to the resource group or below?
I think if it has a representation within like ARM templates or within a resource JSON, then we can do so. So the way that it kind of works is you see the resource group, and then they kind of query to see all of the relationships that resource has, but those resources need to be represented within the control plane, or within the control plane. So if it doesn't exist within the control plane, then they can't really bring it in.
I know it's possible with the resource graph because you can query authorization resources has the role assignment values.
Mhm. Yeah. I haven't tested it myself, but that's a good question. I should definitely let you know.
I think that's a great call out because I think role assignments are not necessarily included in the like quote unquote ARM template. So
Mhm.
it's a great call out, Dominic.
So I'm going through the chat questions here. Can you confirm if it also includes config? Yeah, the config thing there is just mostly that you need to register. Once you get the registration done, you'll be able to work with that. Import blocks, I did see that. That's actually one of our VNext things that we're planning to work on. The main thing is, and I'm curious to hear everyone's feedback here, is I think when we think about Portal, we're wondering, do people want to see the code configuration or do they want to see the import block itself? Because I know for some folks, it might be that they want to just see the code, whereas for others, they might want to actually run a Terraform plan and then bring everything in. We can actually export just the import blocks and let that sort of run its course, but just curious for people's feedback on that regard.
Yeah,
I,
just
I would
speaking
say
for myself.
both.
Yeah, I'd like to see maybe a toggle option for that. I think there's situations where you may need both.
Got it. Got it. Azure policies, that's another interesting one. I think that I'm a saying no for that one, from my understanding of it. Is it tied to a specific Azure provider version? What they do is we actually just roll out to a latest stable version that we've tested. Sometimes individual minor versions can have some funky behaviors. So we do actually pin to particular versions, but for example, right now we're pinned to 4.0.1, I believe, for Azure RM. So we try to make sure that we're relatively up to date. And of course, major versions means that there's no breaking changes, at least usually. Again, I think it's important to, I would say it's important to go ahead and take the code under your own and sort of take whatever you need to. But
Stephen, Ernie asked about support for variables and TFRs as well.
yeah, so we're looking into that one. In the past, I would have said that's pretty tricky, but nowadays, with the power of AI, anything is possible. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. Let's see here. Wow, we have a lot of comments here. A perfect implementation would be code presented with module calls for any AVMs that are available. Yeah, I think we do want to see how we can better integrate verified modules or just modules in general into the experience, if there was a way to do something along those lines. But public preview is trying to, or we're aiming for within the next month-ish, but yeah, we definitely have to. Yeah, we're gonna work hard to get this out to everybody. So
Stephen, the chat's just going bonkers, but there was an interesting idea from Ermi Adine, which was if we could select the provider version, which sounds kind of interesting, although could be potentially a boatload of work to make that possible. But
yeah, I think it would be really nice if we could. The main problem there is if we just the overhead of testing and vetting every single version rather than like, hey, maybe once a semester, once a quarter, we like roll out to a newer version. In an ideal world, right? If we can vet and test everything and make sure it all works, but
So out
yeah,
of
I
curiosity,
agree.
is the ask to or the desire to be able to export for major versions or minor versions?
I could come off mute and explain if that'd be easier for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, sorry, just for clarification, I didn't actually mean for us to choose what version, but more to show in the export here in the portal that, hey, this code was generated with Terraform version 191, and provider version X, just for context if people are copying it. Oh, there, I didn't see that. Sorry, right there.
No worries.
To
Yes,
copy it
yes.
into their code, right?
Yeah, I think the Terraform version is sort of not exposed to you because obviously that's not part of the code. But it's an interesting piece of feedback, so appreciate it. Yeah, so we do export the providers block and the Terraform block as well. So those technically you could copy this and run it. It will probably error because we're exposing properties that aren't necessarily configured. So there's like empty strings and false properties and stuff like that. But plan for seeing similar output export with change analysis. Change analysis is interesting. I think, Gabor, do you mind coming off mute and kind of explaining that one a bit for me?
Sure. So if somebody, let's say an organization is using their custom modules within Terraform and wanted to see, for example, during a major incident that something has been clicked in, somebody has fixed it on the go to see what was the exact change, just to very easily roll it back in via GitHub.
Got it. We don't have plans for that today, but it does sound very interesting as a scenario with the ability to just kind of click up the fix or the patch, if you will.
You could almost
Like
use the
this-
activity log to generate a diff on the Terraform definition of a resource.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess hand in hand with that, are there plans to make it aware of the remote states?
Steven, did you freeze? No.
No.
We don't have any current plans to make it aware of the remote states. Just trying to get it so folks can quickly output Terraform code from the portal. So it's something we can think about, but it would add significant complication to kind of the implementation to make it aware of those states.
Yeah, I was just curious about future roadmap.
Yeah.
I know some people had their hands raised. Sorry, I didn't call on any of you, but did everyone's questions get answered, or did they want to sort of talk about it?
I was just going to point out that currently in the overview, when you hit JSON view, it's kind of a 2-layer diagram, or like there's the ID of the resource, which is currently pretty useful for manually creating the import code. And then it has the ARM JSON for whatever it is. So if you're looking at a resource group and you want to get the long form ID, then usually you hit JSON and then it's right there. So that tab could be made so that there's also a Terraform view where instead of the resource ID, it would be the import for that specific resource and then the Terraform definition right below it.
That's an interesting place to put it, yeah.
Dominic, are you talking about like the parameter, like in the ARM template view? There's like the parameters file, and then there's the template file. Because I think that's a good idea. Like the TFR file. Like if we I have vnext, I have v2, v3, like silly stuff like west US3, and anytime we see constants like that, like we could potentially parameterize it in somewhat of an opinionated way. Of course, we'd have to have some sort of sanity filter on that, of course, because that could get a little hairy.
Thinking that currently, if I have something that I want to import into Terraform, then usually the import statement that you run on the console depends on the ID of that resource. And the most consistent way to get that for any resource is to go to the Overview tab, and then in the top right, there's the JSON View button. It's like just a little text link. And then that opens up the right side panel. So that could be made into a tabbed layout. So at the top, it's JSON tab by default, and then there'd be a Terraform tab. So instead of showing the ID as its own text thing with a copy button, it would be the import statement. So it'd be import and then the resource ID and then some auto suggested name for what Terraform reference that should be imported to. And then below it, it would have the definition, which is a little different than what's on screen right now, because what's on screen is the resource group and everything within it. So I was thinking more just for the single resource you're looking at right now, it could be made into a tab under the JSON view.
Love
Yeah,
it. Love it.
I'm wondering, is there a big difference to you, Dominic, if it's an import block versus the import command that you run in the CLI?
I think both would be pretty, like it'd be easy to include both, right? So I don't see why you would have one over the other. I do use import blocks a lot now, but there's also a time and a place for running it just from the command line. So given that it's just like rearranging kind of the string, I would say include both.
Got it.
I would vote for import block markup because it eliminates an extra step of like, okay, here's my code file, dump that into VS Code, and then I gotta run an import command. Well, actually, yeah, you I don't see how that workflow would even work, right? Because you'd have to run the import commands and then you'd have to run the apply or something like that. But having it as an
Oh yeah, I
import
guess
block
I
just
forgot
seems
the
very
the import command requires that there's like a skeleton definition of the thing being imported, right? I forgot about that.
yeah. So it seems like import block would just be cleaner. Like people
Yeah,
wouldn't have to fuss.
you could maybe do it so that there's a name field where it populates with a suggested value, and that would dynamically update in the import block what destination it's going to import into Terraform. Because right now it's just like res-1-2 or whatever when using the AZTF export style. But if you made it some kind of web component or whatever, so that when you update the name field, it would update the definition below it, that would also make it easy for quick additions.
Very neat. Love the feedback so far. I don't know if anyone follows our Twitter, but us posting that this was in private preview is like our most liked post by far of all time. So
It's a sick feature, man. I'm super stoked. I've been checking to see if it shows up in my portal as a FTE, but not yet.
go to I think I told people here, but if you go to rc.portal.azure.com, that's where you can access it today. For everybody who's external, they need to go through a manual approval process. That's how private previews work. But internal folks can get the auto. They just need to register the feature, which I don't know if you have the instructions, Mark, on how to do that, but I can send it to you. All right. Any other thoughts on this?
Posted the instructions, Stephen, on how to register for the private preview in the chat. So, yeah, a few people have spotted
Yes,
that.
hopefully that's upvoted somewhere. I know the chat is going crazy today, so I'm doing my best to make my way through the fog.
I brought this up on an unrelated topic because I misunderstood what I think somebody else had suggested, but I just didn't want it to get lost. I really and I'd like to hear if people like this idea or not from the audience, but I like the idea of having like a parameter file, like a TFR file, and then the code file, so that we can have those two things. So if that could, that would make it a little bit easier, a little less refactoring, when I copy pasta this thing out of here. That would be what I would say.
Are you suggesting that it would, instead of saying location equals and then literal west US, it would convert it to a variable?
Yeah, and there would be some sane like defaults in terms of like the logic to extract those hard-coded constants out of there. I don't think we need or should go down the path of doing every constant, because then our Terraform config is just going to look like ARM templates. I mean, for real. So we don't need a billion input variables, but like I think there are a sane few that like are repeatable. Also, I don't know if I can see this, but do we do like resource ID references correctly? Can you scroll down in this at all, Stephen?
We do not.
It's a
This is a
video.
very much hard-coded experience.
Well, okay. Yeah, so hard-coded resource IDs would be a wonderful thing as well. But yeah, these are all micro optimizations, of course, right? But
Yeah, there's our
a
public
human,
IP
we could
address.
apply human intelligence to bang this out, but just reducing that toil would be appreciated.
Yeah, for sure.
If the variables suggestion is going to be pursued, I would advocate to keep the option to display it as just literals, because I think part of the value is for newcomers to Terraform is being able to see everything without indirection is a good way to have it, and not everyone would want the variables to be in their own, like someone might want the location to be variable and someone might want it to just stay as the literal kind of thing. So having it remaining as just the literal view would be good. And then for the import blocks, what I've done in some of my automations is that here, like on the screen, we see the generated code where it's like res-3 and stuff. And then I would zip the code so that the import blocks are above each of those resource blocks as well. And then what's the other thing? For resource groups, like if I have a set of things that I want to import that might span multiple subscriptions, is there a way to look at the resource groups blade and then check 3 different resource groups from 3 different subscriptions and have it generate using provider aliases?
Sorry, can you say that last part one more time?
So
Provider alias?
if you have 2 different resource groups and 2 different subscriptions, then Terraform by default has the default provider. But if you want to import something from a different subscription, then you need a provider declaration with an alias and then the subscription ID or something to differentiate it. And then in the import block, you can also specify the provider, or in the resource block. Like if you have 2 different subscriptions, you need 2 different providers, and that's using an alias. So if I wanted to import multiple resource groups from different subscriptions, then does the AZTF export tool, which I presume is powering this, does that support generating code that uses different subscriptions?
It only limits itself to one subscription. The thought there is that you kind of run it once for that one sub, and then you run it again for the other sub. But it's an interesting scenario for sure.
Yeah, I would. It seems it's pretty niche though. Like, I think we should. I would not. That would
Not go
be
that
like
route.
way down on the backlog list, in my opinion. But
I just saw, Sophie, you're having issues with that. Yes, you need to register the features to graciously put the instructions in there, but we can go ahead and you can register for that, get on the wait list, and then once you're approved, you'll be good to go. So, all right. I do want to make sure we get through everything, so I'm going to hand it off to Mark so that he can talk about the Copilot stuff.
All right. Looks like I can take control, so I will try that. All right. So just wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we're doing from a Copilot perspective. If you haven't heard, we have added the ability to ask Terraform questions of Azure Copilot. So if you have access to Copilot, you can ask it how to generate or what a Terraform configuration is for in your scenario using your natural language. So we essentially, I'm not going to use that, but what it allows you to do, there are a number of scenarios that we have in mind, and I'm sure there are a lot more. But what we found in talking to a number of customers is that if someone's new to Azure, this can help them get familiar with Azure concepts. So if they're familiar with Terraform, but they're not familiar with Azure concepts, this can help them kind of bridge that gap there. which can be super valuable, where they can kind of describe what they're looking for. I want a 3-tiered app in Azure. Give me some advice on how to do that, and then give me some Terraform code on how to do that. Another scenario is around when they're new to Terraform, so they are very familiar with Azure. So they understand all the different VM SKU types and all of that stuff. You can really describe what you're looking for there and have it generate your Terraform configuration from that. And not only people that are new to either one of those, but Azure's changing on a regular basis. So having the help of, there's a new service out, how do I manage this thing with Azure or with Terraform, is another scenario where we see this can be super helpful for folks. From a demo perspective, what I am showing here is just how to get to Copilot. So assuming your organization doesn't block you from using Copilot, if you go to the portal on any tab and any blade, you can click Copilot and ask it a Terraform related question, and it will generate the code for you. You know that it is going to generate Terraform code when the generating Terraform configuration comes up. If you ask it a generic question, it might come to the doc handler and show you something different. But if you see that generating Terraform code or configuration, you know that it hit our endpoint and is going to generate Terraform code for you. So it gives you a good description of what it's generating and then gives you the Terraform code there. The feedback that we have from customers is this side panel thing is kind of terrible from a code viewing perspective. So the way that we see folks using it now is to just copy that code and put it over in VS Code, and then kind of work on it from there. We're working on some other options there on kind of how we can make better experiences in the portal for that, as well as how we can provide that experience right in VS Code. And those are things that we're working on in the near future. So other questions that come up, or where does it get the context for the values and those types of things? It is just generating them based on random allowed values, essentially. We don't have any context on your infrastructure in your subscription or your code that you currently have or anything like that. Those are definitely things that we're looking at for the future. But right now, it's going to give you a working piece of code that you can use to start and go from there. And one of the key things that I don't show here is we're not just using kind of the large language models like GPT-4o or anything like that. We're augmenting it with some known good examples. So we have seen that we are providing, like, in the order of, or in the realm of 80% valid code, versus if you just use a regular large language model, you'll get, I think it was like 30% or something like that. So you just ask the model and it gives you an answer that looks like valid Terraform code, but most of the time it's not. So we're really trying to ensure that you get working code that you can start from and then go from there. I will pause there. Any questions, comments on that so far? Nick? You have a question?
Yeah, hi there. I was just wondering, in terms of kind of Copilot usage in the enterprise, what you're kind of seeing in terms of the uptake. So the reason for me is I can see the advantage for some of our systems administrators getting up to scratch with how it can work. However, in an environment which is heavily controlled via pipelines, how does it kind of interact with that without you basically enabling them to learn but not compromising the estate as it is? It kind of just scares me slightly, than being able to just kind of take some code and run it in without necessarily going through all the environmental processes that we have.
Yeah, so we don't we provide the code to you. We don't give you any way of running that code. So it's not like you can see the code and hit go deploy this. We intentionally do not do that, and we have a note in the code that we generate that essentially it says this is AI generated. You need to look this over before running it. So I believe if I understand your question, the idea is that they would take that code and bring it into the regular processes that you have. So put it in VS Code, check it in, have it go through the pipeline. And if there are kind of requirements from that perspective, they should get caught at that point. Is that what you were asking about, or?
Yeah, largely. I mean, basically, as soon as we saw it, it was disabled for us because of the assumption that we would basically have people making use of that to actually execute across the estate. But we'll take a greater look at that now. Thank you.
Yeah. And that is for Terraform in general. So from a Copilot perspective, there are other handlers that will allow you to run things, but they won't do it automatically. They will prompt you if you are okay with running it. Like if you generate a ARG query, it will show you the query and then say, do you want to run this, or give you the option to run it, I think.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
We treat generative AI like any code that anyone would write, right? So, we treat it kind of like a junior developer. Like, we're not going to take their code and commit it and use it. We do a code review on it. We make sure we understand what it's doing, right? And so I think that's how we're trying to do it at an enterprise level as well.
Good. That makes sense. So Stu asks if the data that goes into Azure Copilot is used for training. Do you mean the prompts that we get? So if someone asks a question, do we use that for training?
Yes.
If that is the question, we can't see questions unless you provide your feedback and allow us to see that. So if you want your question to kind of help improve the Copilot, please give us thumbs up, some thumbs down, and then in the next page, tell us kind of what you liked or disliked about it and hit submit. When you do that, that will give us the prompt and the answer and allow us to kind of use that and be able to kind of improve what we've done from there. So in general, if someone just asks a question, we can't have no visibility into those prompts, so can't do anything to improve things.
Thanks.
Cool. Anything else come up there that I missed? All right, so I will jump to the next slide here real quick. Continue to ask any questions or anything. Just to give you some visibility into what we have coming kind of in our future plans. Quality is the #1 piece that we're focused on right now. So we really want to make sure that the code that we give you is functional code. So that when you bring it into VS Code, you can run Terraform in it, Terraform plan, and you're not going to get a bunch of errors saying that this property doesn't exist and all of that. So we are working on improving those processes, things from adopting the new large language models to improving our RAG process. And if you don't know what RAG is, it's essentially a way of updating and augmenting the data that the large language models already have. And that includes having good quality examples. So essentially building up our set of known good examples that we'll provide with the model. And the other thing that we're working on is validation. So being able to, once or before we give you the code, run it through Terraform Validate to make sure it's syntactically correct. The issue, or one of the issues that we have with that, is it's time consuming. So we don't want it to take 5 minutes to return to you because we were going through a loop of Terraform validate, there's an error, so we pass it back and try to fix that error and go back and forth a bunch of times. So we are working on optimizing that. And if we reduce the number of round trips there, we can shorten the time. So the real thing that we're trying to improve is that known good example, so that we can, on the first time out, give you a good quality answer. The other things which I've touched on a little bit are expanding the scope. Right now, it is limited to Azure RM provider. We are going to be in the very near future adding support for AZ API, and not in the near future, but we do have the ask is to support modules, like starting with Azure verified modules and potentially your modules as well. From a better context perspective, a lot of the things that we've been asked from customers is having your context in there. So information about your environment or your configurations. So how you name things, and those types of things, how you organize your code, kind of bring that into the example. So look at your data and know that this is the way that you do that, so that we can better align with that, so there's less refactor on your part. And the last thing that I mentioned is we're looking at, instead of that sidebar panel, having kind of a full screen view, so you can kind of see that code and iterate on that in the portal, but also have it integrated with VS Code, so you can go into VS Code and ask a question there and have it hit our handler, so that you get those high quality responses right in VS Code where you're working anyway. Questions or comments on that? Mark.
I had kind of a nutty idea. I don't use GitHub Codespaces a lot, but like some of the folks that I meet up at local meetups, they use it, and it spins up like a little miniature environment, for them. What if we had GitHub Codespaces integration where, we could? It's almost like that ARM template to deploy. Like click this button to deploy the ARM template. Couldn't we in a code space like be able to run Terraform apply on this code and work with it in that code space? That would be kind of a fun way to do lab, kind of kick the tires, so to speak.
That's an interesting idea. It would go against some of the other questions or concerns that folks had where they wanted to integrate with their existing pipelines and processes, though.
Oh yeah,
I guess what you could do is launch into a code space, and then you could use, because code spaces support a Docker container underneath it. So use dev containers, and then you could use that as your environment to sort of kick the tires and do a deployment from. But it wouldn't be a direct deploy. It more be an easy way to get it into an environment that you then have all the tools you need to check it over, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think that definitely there's like two scenarios. One is like, hey, I'm happy with this and I want to move forward with it long term. And another is like, I just want to kick the tires, see what this thing does, and test it, and have fun with it, and then throw it away. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else? If not, how are we doing on time? We are 10 minutes away. I will jump over that. Basically, that was just a demo of, just in quotes, that was a demo of us exposing that functionality in GitHub. So you can go in and ask, in VS Code. So you can go into VS Code, open up the Copilot in there and say at Terraform, or I think at Azure Terraform or at Terraform or something like that. So use their participant model. And that participant model uses our backend to answer those questions. So it's something that we're working on, and we'll hopefully have out in the near future.
Mark, you know what? I rather than try to shove all of my AZ API content into 10 minutes, why don't you just go ahead and show that demo, and we can just wrap up with Copilot today, and then next month I'll talk AZ API.
Cool. Sounds good. You can't try that out today, by the way, but we'll have it soon.
Any other questions about Copilot? Anyone? There was one feature request that Mark T dropped in the chat around basically being able to correlate your deployments with the Terraform apply, a bit like what currently exists with ARM templates. Thought it was an interesting idea. Mark, you want to talk more about it? Sorry, I know you're eating lunch, but
Yeah, I'm just shoving noodles in my mouth. Yeah, I don't. It seems like it would be feasible. I know we've talked about correlation identifiers on the ARM requests. I don't know if it's like built into the provider, but it seems like it would be a pretty easy add. Of course, there might be like, legal, like, hey, you have to let us use correlation IDs or something like that. I don't know, but basically, like, there would be some UI work, and some back end work within ARM to basically identify this correlation identifier and then bundle all these requests that come in. Because I mean, we were talking about this related to that Azure policy issue at HashiConf. ARM and Bicep come in as one big payload, or like layers of payloads, right? That can be evaluated in bulk, but Terraform kind of, comes in as like a bunch of individual calls. If we attach correlation identifier to all those calls, we run a Terraform apply. All we need to do is like take that correlation identifier, create a deployment record in our deployments tab, and then introduce this concept of a deployment type, ARM, Terraform, whatever, Pulme, whatever. And then we can, see how people are deploying to, our Azure environments using that technique. There'd be a little bit you'd have to do client side and a little bit you'd have to do server side, so to speak, within the control plane, but it would be helpful for an operator, I think.
That is a really good idea. We have investigated that in the past and have not pushed on it too much. The underlying components from Terraform's perspective are already there. It's just a matter of getting an endpoint that would support that from the deployments table, essentially, a way to kind of inject those in there. It's certainly something we can talk to the team about. I mean, when we looked at it before, it was before we were part of that team. So now that we're part of that team, it might be easier to kind of get that in there.
I know I, for one, would appreciate it because I hate spelunking the activity log. If I can avoid it, it would be nice. So,
great idea.
There's one more question here. Can we ground the Copilot handlers around our org's GitHub modules for customizations for security and compliance reasons?
Yeah, those are things that we're investigating. That was part of the future looking thing. We're looking at integrating with modules. That is not going to be exactly straightforward, in my opinion, but it is something that we're looking at doing. And the other thing is grounding or being able to use your, I don't want to say corporate information, but allow you to kind of allow the model to learn from either how you have coded other Terraform examples, be it modules or just your configurations, or how you have named things in Azure itself. So essentially give you a way of saying, use this subscription as kind of a best practices for our organization. And then we could learn from that. So those are two things that we are looking at looking at enabling in the future. But like I said, our highest order bit right now is around quality. We want to make sure that you get code that works out of the gate. And then we'll get into some of this additional stuff.
Awesome. Okay, we have a few minutes left. Any other questions from anyone?
So as you guys are developing the AZ API, kind of what do you see as the use cases of when you're going to focus on doing something in Azure RM versus leveraging AZ API? So is API going to eventually kind of decrease the development of the Azure RM provider, or are they going to be in lockstep? What does that future look like?
So we are working on getting some messaging out there that is published on both HashiCorp and Microsoft blogs, just to really show that we're on the same page on this. On a high level, I think what I can say right now is Azure M is not going anywhere. AZ API is not going anywhere. AZ API, obviously, right, resource-specific versioning means that you can kind of roll out to the newest version as you please without needing to upgrade the provider and all the resources alongside it. Whereas Azure M, is a stable, it's a simple sort of a lot of complexities are abstracted away for you. So we see use cases for both. And there is a lot of people, obviously, who have a lot of Azure RM. And I think if they are still happy with what they're doing in Azure RM, if it's not broken, they don't need to fix it, right? But for those who are, trying to be on the knife's edge, there is a reality around just the AZ API provider as a way to help with all that. And again, next time we're going to share about all of that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Just want to go against Mark Tinderholt here. That's the messaging that we're trying to get away from. AZ API is not a shim. It is a way of accessing Azure without having to wait for kind of that convenience layer being built for Azure RM.
And a lot of our investments into the provider, right, are about trying to make sure that it's first class for people who like being on latest features. Because if you have latest features problems, that's not just a one-time thing. That's going to keep happening for container apps or for AKS over and over and over and over. So being able to just roll out to the latest API version and do that relatively painlessly, then you could do that and just kind of snap your fingers. So, and 2.0 is out for everyone. I'm not going to be able to talk about all the stuff that happened in 2.0, but if you want to go visit the GitHub and see all the new features, or we have a blog post that talked about 2.0. So definitely check it out. We think it's a great provider. Oops, I just dropped a new tab as a link. That work? Back. Yeah. Anyways, go check out the 2.0. Definitely think it's a great experience.
We're gonna have to come up with a new word, Mark. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Okay, there's the post. Okay. Stu, I see you have the last second question.
Yeah, sure. I can ask it. So, App Gateway, I'll just drop something in the chat. So at the top of the App Gateway notes for Azure RM, there's a note that basically says, hey, when you run a plan, it can rearrange everything. So your plan sucks, basically. It's me summarizing it quickly. But it does actually figure it out in the apply, and it's all good. It doesn't destroy the resources. This is a real killer for us just recently. And I just wondered, with Azure RM 4.0 coming out, is it being looked at?
I don't know. We can look into that for you. I know the reason behind it. I don't know how in the weeds you want to get, but essentially Terraform, when it gets a list of things back, it expects them to be in a certain order. The App Gateway API does not do that. It just returns the list in whatever order it sees or wants, and it changes each time. So that's kind of the root cause of that. So we can look and see if it has been resolved in 4.0, but I don't know for sure.
No, it hasn't. I've just dropped the GitHub issue in the
Okay.
link as well. We've tried all the things like mapping it to make sure that each item in the list is in the known order and so forth, but it's still a problem for us.
Okay.
I think it's underlying API issue, not a provider issue, unfortunately. I think it's the way the API returns it.
That's correct,
Well,
Sean. I think you're right too.
It's a combination of the two. It's the how the Terraform provider works or Terraform in general works, and how the API returns the information.
All right. I think we're a little over time, so I'm going to let folks go. Thank you all for joining this month. I know we're working through a lot of random issues with just the different growth of the community and growth of this call, and appreciate you all working through those technical difficulties as emails kind of get spammed or meeting invites fall off the calendar. So hopefully everyone sees an instance for next month. It should be the week before Thanksgiving, not Thanksgiving Day. So we'll see everyone there, and have a great rest of your week. And yeah, see you in November.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
How you guys? Talk to you later.
See everybody.
Bye bye.
Cheers.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.